Welcome to the Financial Flossing Podcast with Ross Brannan, guiding dental professionals to a brighter future. Ross Brannan is a financial advisor who knows it's not just about your teeth. He helps dental practice owners protect and maximize today's cash flow to plan for tomorrow's cash needs. Find him at rossbrannan.com. On the show, he brings together experts to help dental professionals looking to make smart money decisions to grow their income, turn their retirement goals into reality, and improve their lives. And now, here's your host, Ross Brannan.
Welcome to the show. Today we have the infamous Dr. Mark Costas, host of the Dentalpreneur Podcast and creator of the Dental Success Institute. He is a two-time guest. Mark, welcome to the show.
Russ, thanks, man. I appreciate you having me back. I guess I didn't scare you away the first time. So that's always nice to see that invitation come back around.
I've gotten to know you more since we first talked, which is probably about a year and a half ago. And I've even been to a couple of your events and gotten really to see what DSI does. And I think it serves such a beautiful purpose in the dental community. For those of our listeners who don't know what DSI is, tell people your story and how DSI came to be.
Yeah, sure. We'll just take it from like a business perspective. I graduated from dental school in 2002. I guess if you want to go back a little bit before that, dentistry I'm not a legacy. I don't have a dad who is a dentist or a mom or a grandfather or anything like that. That is very common in dentistry for those people that don't know that. Legacy and following in parents' footsteps, grandparents' footsteps, generational dental families is very common. Doesn't look like it's going to happen for me. I have 3 boys. Maybe my youngest, he's my last hope, but I was not a legacy and dentistry really wasn't on my radar. I wanted to be a physician. I wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon, but I still had very much of an entrepreneurial spirit. Everybody in my family has an entrepreneurial spirit. But when I was 16 years old, I was playing in my first varsity baseball game and misjudged home run hit to the left field fence. And instead of playing the ball off the fence, I ran smack into the fence, broke my jaw, lost most of my upper front teeth, and spent the next 18 months in and out of dental offices working with these great dental teams to repair my jaw and my face. And that's when I got interested in dentistry.
So instead of playing the ball off the fence, you played your face off the fence.
That's right. I did a really great job. Really effectively messed up my face. Pretty good. I was on the front page of the local newspaper too, which was great. Action shot. You rarely get an action shot of doing something well on the baseball field, but they got frame by frame me actually hitting the fence with my face. And yeah, that's how I got into dentistry. Ended up taking quite a bit of time, 3 years and 21 tries to get into dental school because I was a kid that had kind of attention problems, a little bit of learning disability with dyslexia and comprehension issues when I was growing up. My kids all have the same issues. Although I grasped material, a lot of times I didn't comprehend it well, or the teachers would have to read my exams to me out loud just for me to grasp information. So my GPA was average. My test scores were average. So it took me a bit to get into dental school. While I was trying to get into dental school, 3 years in San Diego, I bought my first business and I got accepted into the executive MBA program at the University of San Diego. So I was getting my MBA at night and
what was the business?
I owned a catering truck. So basically a taco truck. I had 3 employees. I had a cook. I had somebody that washed the truck and somebody that stocked the truck. And I was the driver, and we would go from construction site to businesses that didn't have a formal cafeteria. And that's what I would do all day long. We had an actual full functioning kitchen, restaurant style kitchen in the back of this thing. And we would drive it around. And that was my very first business. So I learned a lot about entrepreneurship from that experience. If you were to ask what was a more valuable experience, the MBA program or the catering truck experience, I would definitely say the catering truck experience, because you learn everything about the cycle of a business, marketing, HR, dealing with vendors, dealing with expenses, dealing with taxes, learning how to read a financial report. All of those things I learned on the ground with pretty high stakes because I was a young 21-year-old that basically leveraged every penny that I had to buy this business. And I realized that the owner gets paid last, which is a very valuable lesson to learn as an entrepreneur, maybe the most valuable lesson. So I finally got into dental school, went to Marquette University, graduated, and I knew that I wanted to turn this into an entrepreneurial venture. So I started multiple practice ownership. All told, I ended up owning 16 dental practices, but I was on the come up, 4 practices, 8 practices, 12 practices. Started getting asked to speak on stages about multiple practice ownership and efficiencies and increasing production, increasing profitability, EBITDA, speaking about the basics of owning a dental business and how to scale from a single location to multiple locations. And then I started taking on personal one-on-one clients, and that grew into large-ish live events that I was hosting. And now 12 years later, DSI is one of the largest consultancies in dentistry, and it all has been propped up and expanded through the podcast and my live speaking engagements.
So you have the biggest podcast in the dental industry. Just so people have an understanding of what that means, give them some numbers. How many people are listening to the Dentalpreneur podcast?
Yeah, so we have 1,860 episodes recorded. We've been doing this since 2015. We have almost 10 million downloads total, and between 8 and 12,000 unique people in 151 countries will listen on any given day, 5 to 6.
That's phenomenal. So you started coaching people one-on-one, and then obviously you had to scale that in some way because there's only so much time in the day. So you created DSI, correct?
That's correct. That's correct. Yeah. And DSI is a very special place. It's a very community-oriented coaching structure, unlike any other coaching or consulting business in dentistry. Like I said, we're collaborative, very close community. All of our coaches, we have 22 what we call black belt coaches inside DSI. All of them are actual practice owners that own dental practices and practice clinical dentistry. Some of them are very limited as far as their practice of clinical dentistry now, but all of them have gone through the DSI curriculum, have very successful businesses, and they take time out of their schedule every week to coach their fellow DSI members. We have live events that they attend, 3 per year, one large event, which is the Dental Success Summit. We create financial reports for them every single week. We have a whole branch of DSI that is financial analytics, and we have financial analysts that get on the phone or a Zoom meeting with each member every single month and go over their financial reports, identify weaknesses, and help them forecast into the future for growth, etc. And then the black belt coaches and myself do the coaching calls regarding leadership, practice management, being a more effective CEO, etc. So that's basically what we're all about. Be totally unique. A typical consultancy will have 1 or 2 consultants that will actually travel out to the dental practices. They'll teach out of kind of a cookbook based on very limited actual dental ownership experience. All of our coaches are actually either still doing it or have done it very successfully in the past.
Well, I went to the summit this year, and it was massive. It is a very big event, and there's definitely a family culture there. It's definitely these are not strangers. These are people who know each other. They're like best friends. They vacation together. It is a very unique culture that if someone is looking for a group, the DSI is absolutely something they should go check out. But what I found interesting, I've always said there is this continuum of practice ownership. You have people on one side who basically own a job. It's a good job, but it's a job, and you might call it like a lifestyle practice. And you have people who are business owners on the opposite end of the spectrum who happen to be dentists, and they really do financial. And you have everyone in between. And I think DSI does as good of a job as any place I've seen at helping people transition from owning a job to owning a business. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Michael Gerber wrote this great book called The E-Myth Revisited, and he talks specifically about this. This was one of the books that I read very early on in my business ownership journey. And he talks about the difference between being a technician and being the owner of your business. And a technician is somebody that works inside your business. And just like you said so eloquently, you basically bought and own a job. So you are working inside the business. You're the main driver of revenue within your business. If you remove yourself from this business, there is no business. So Therefore, it is not a business. It's a job that you've created. If you structure it differently, where the business runs independent of you, you could be a part of the financial engine of the practice. You could be one of the main producers, but definitely you're not the only producer. You're not a bottleneck in the business. You're not doing all of the production. In fact, the ideal dental practice, I believe, is a dental practice where you can work as long as you want, but even if you remove yourself, it's still a very productive and profitable business, even without you. I unfortunately got to test out this theory a couple of years ago. My dad got very sick, and I got a phone call from my mom in the middle of a procedure that I was doing. I literally put down the handpiece and I did not go back to the practice for almost a month and a half. I didn't check in. I didn't call. I didn't see how anybody was doing in the practice. And the practice, guess what? It still did great. I was just one of many providers in that particular dental practice. That practice ran by a very effective leadership team that I coached up and systems that we created as a team. So that, in my opinion, would be a real business. And you can't have 16 locations if you are the primary provider in all 16. It's just not physically possible.
Well,
so you have to figure out how to do it.
And if you read Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad or Cash Flow Quadrant, he talks about the difference in being self-employed and owning a business. And the true test of owning a business is, can you walk away like you did for 6 weeks? But what percentage of practices, I think you've told me there's what, 200,000 dentists in the US roughly?
180 something thousand practicing dentists. Yeah.
Okay. How many actual practices do you think there are? Privately owned practices, not corporate owned practices, if you had to guess?
They say about 72 to 74% of practicing dentists own their dental practices. So you can do the math.
Okay. So call it $120 just for round numbers. Maybe it's a little more, $130. What percentage of dentists who own a practice own a job versus own a business?
You can extrapolate from some statistics that I know off the top of my head. The average dental practice has an overhead of 68 to 72%. That's excluding doctor compensation. So
stop right there. How many people even know that number? How many non-DSI dentists know that number?
I don't imagine most people even understand or know what their overhead is versus profitability versus the categorization on their P&Ls. But if you add the average 30% to doctor compensation, whether it's one doctor or a handful of doctors, if doctor salaries end up being about 25 to 30% of the total gross revenue, you're looking at 68% plus 30%. That's 98%. So that dental practice is 2% profitable. And the one that's 72% overhead, which is this range, 68 to 72, you add 30% to that practice is negative 2% profitable. So those practices are not able to run without that doctor churning and spinning the handpiece every single day. So most of these practices are not businesses, they're jobs.
And what's fascinating is you're teaching people how to read financial statements, how to understand the numbers of their practice, because it is a business. I realize many people look at it altruistically. That's why they went to dental school, to help people, but you have to keep the lights on, and you're providing a job for numerous people. And if you don't know your numbers, then you're really doing everyone a disservice. You're doing your patients a disservice, because if you're out of business in 6 months, where are they going to go?
Yeah, it's absolutely true. That's what I love about dentistry, is that entrepreneurial spirit, that it's still alive and well in our profession. Whether or not people do it well, it's still alive. And interestingly enough, many people get into dentistry because they are entrepreneurial minded. And the living that we can make, even if we are an average producer and an average to poor dental practice owner, is still very good. The average dentist makes $230,000 a year, which is more than 4 times the average income of the typical American in the United States. So even if you're doing very badly, you're doing well. So I don't want to sound judgy, like everybody needs to own a dental practice and everybody needs to expand to multiple practices. Associateship is great for a lot of people. It's still a great living. You have the ability to not worry and risk a large portion of your net worth in order to grow this thriving business. But I do believe the upside is worth all the hard work and the risk.
Let's talk about one of the more polarizing topics in dentistry, and that is the DSO world. You tend to find people love DSOs or hate DSOs and everything in between. But because of your network and all the people and all your friends who have sold and all your friends who have decided not to sell,
Mhm.
what do you think is when should somebody sell? I have argued in a majority of cases, getting rid of the golden goose may not always be the best idea, but everyone's situation is facts and circumstance dependent. So if someone's considering selling, what do you think they should be considering, whether they do or not?
This is such a personal answer. I can give my just insights based on my experience in coaching lots of dentists through a transition, some to private buyers, some to DSOs. I coach dentists on the regular about the decision of when to do this, when is the right time, when you still have a lot of meat on the bone. It's maybe better to build this thing for a period of time before you transition. Right now, I don't think anybody can dispute that there's a lot of white hot money that's still flowing into dentistry and has been for the last 12, 15 years. Private equity money, family office money, venture capital money, people that are looking towards dentistry because it's a stable industry to offset some of the riskier investments that they have gotten themselves or interested in investing in. So if you take a private equity fund, they'll have manufacturing and they'll have alcohol and they'll have real estate and they'll have technology, which is a very high multiple, but very risky. If you hit one of the unicorns in technology, it could be a very high return for all the investors involved. And then you look at an industry like dentistry is one of the more stable industries, and they'll throw that into the pie of investments in order to offset or hedge some of the riskier investments. So dentistry is extremely attractive to white hot money, private equity funds. And there are, I didn't know this until very recently, thousands and thousands of private equity companies. And several hundred are interested in the DSO market, which is very interesting. Many more than people even understand. There are consolidated DSOs that are flying under the radar that people don't even understand and know about. So if you are going to be selling your practice at some point, and you will reach a point when your practice is too big to sell on the private market, that's a doctor-to-doctor sale. So once you get over a certain level of EBITDA, a certain physical capacity or size, certain number of providers for one particular location or a cluster, a regional cluster of locations, you could potentially grow yourself out of a sector of the population that could actually get financing for your particular practice. So then you're looking at a very limited buying pool. And that limited buying pool is typically private equity / private equity backed dental support organizations, DSOs. So you could do great for cash flow. You could grow this amazing facility and then find that the only people that could get financing or could afford to buy your practice is either all 5 of your associates coming in together and purchasing you one at a time or all at once, or more often than not, a private equity backed DSO. The upside to building a practice that is attractive to a DSO is that the multiples are typically higher. So if you're going to sell on the open market to a single doctor, you're looking at 2 to 3.5 times your profitability or your EBITDA, which is great. If you have a dental practice that, just for round numbers, has $1 million in EBITDA, which is a large practice, probably $5 million in gross revenue or so, and you're selling it on the open market, that could potentially be 2 to 3 million for the purchase, maybe even higher, $5 million for the purchase of that practice. If you're selling doctor to doctor, most doctors won't be able to qualify for a loan that size, but a private equity company would be willing to pay you a higher multiple for that, maybe a 5, 6, or a 7 on the high end. You have to look at your own personal financial situation and say, hey, look, I'm getting these offers from what I would consider as a decent DSO. I'm going to have to sign an employment agreement with them to work for another 3 to 5 years and have a boss for a little bit, but I'll be able to take chips off the table. you just have to look to see if you have a financial vehicle outside of the money that's being generated by your dental practice, put that money to work after taxes and generate some of that money that's offset in addition to your clinical output that you're going to be living off of after you sell your dental practice. So there's a lot of factors that go into whether or not it's the right time to sell, whether it's the right time to take chips off the table. What we have to remember, though, that in this particular slice of time, DSOs are competing, even in this high interest rate environment, DSOs are competing to buy the best dental practices. We may never see multiples as high as they are from DSOs that they're offering right now. Prognosticators are saying that in the next 5 to 7 years, we could be as much as 70% consolidated. Now, that's pretty aggressive, but some people are saying we could be up to 70% consolidated in 7 years. If that's the case, then those multiples are going to go down significantly. There's not going to be the same competitive landscape as there is right now because most DSOs would be fat and happy. So right now you have to do a lot of soul searching personally, if it's the right time for you. You have to do a lot of analysis of your own financial situation, and you have to do a little bit of forecasting. Is this going to continue on the way that it's going now, the way that's going on currently? Or am I taking a risk and rolling the dice, thinking that everything is going to stay the same, the multiples are going to be this high in 5 years, and continue to grow my practice? So lots and lots to factor into your decision.
Do you ever see anybody sell, do their earn out, and then go start a practice again?
Yes, outside of their non-compete.
Yeah, outside of their non-compete, because that seems like that would really be, because you and I know young people under 40 who are selling for big numbers, but I'm like, you're under 40. What are you going to do? Go work for 3 to 5 years for the DSO. Maybe you learn something. Maybe you go insane because you're working for somebody else. But you've already cracked the code. You can go do it all over again. Mm-hmm. You may not want to, but you could. But so prognosticators are saying the consolidation could continue up to 70%. What do you think? Pull out your crystal ball. What do you think is going to happen in the next 5 to 7 years?
Yeah, it's even very difficult to get a straight number on how consolidated we are right now. Some people say 22%, some people say 38%. It's very difficult to even calculate or get a good solid number that everybody agrees on as far as the percentage of consolidation that we've experienced so far. So it's very difficult when it's so fuzzy already for me to say it's going to be 50% in 5 years. I don't know. But I do know that the trend is going to continue to accelerate, and we will have much higher consolidation than we do right now. Say it's 25% right now. I would say it would double in the next 5 to 6 years.
Now, a lot of people have sold, and a lot of sales that have gone well, and you probably know a lot of sales that haven't gone well. If someone was going to sell, what advice would you give to them? I've personally seen people try and sell with brokers that were less than ideal, and it's not been a great experience. I know people who have sold with great brokers, and it's been a phenomenal experience. What would you say if you're going to sell? Here's what you should really consider doing or think about.
Oh man, there's so much. I could have a full day discussion about this, but just from a financial perspective, there's some things that you really need to pay attention to. There are lots of different ways to manipulate a sales price. You'll hear people walking around beating their chest saying, hey man, I did great. I got an 11 times EBITDA, or I got a 12 times EBITDA. You hear of some of these larger regional DSOs that say they claim they got a 15 times EBITDA, which is great. But you have to understand that if you are going to be looking at that EBITDA number only, there's a lot of different ways that brokers and DSOs can manipulate that sales price and beat you up on EBITDA. Right? You're like, I calculate, and my CPA and my neutral third party says that my EBITDA is $1 million. So I want to multiply my $1 million times 10 times, because that's what you said you're going to pay me. So pay me $10 million for my practice. And potentially the DSO or the private equity company could say, we agree, you have a great practice. We're totally with you. You deserve a 10. Let us do our quality of earnings, and we're gonna do our valuation on your practice. And they come back at $750,000 in EBITDA, because their valuation and the way that they calculate it is slightly different in their favor. So you can say, I got my 10, but they don't care about the multiple number. They care about the amount of money that they're willing to pay for a dental practice. So that's one thing. And then you're looking at terms. Terms are very important. Most people want to take as many chips off the table as possible. So let's just say it's a 70-30 or a 60-40. That just means that if you got a $10 million valuation for your large dental practice, a 60-40 would mean $6 million down at the time of close. And then at the recap, in some future date, when they sell to a larger fish, this DSO to a larger fish, or there's a recapitalization, and they resell this asset that they built up and redistribute the profits to the people that are invested in the fund, then your money's, your 40% in this case would be reinvested. So you'd have $4 million that would be reinvested into the company that just bought you, and you should get a nice return on the 40%. So you have to look at what we would call that second bite of the apple, at the strength of the organization. You have to say, how strong are they? Do I agree with their philosophies? Are they super heavy-handed? What is the average growth of the practices that they have purchased already? So you have to look at the strength, reputation, philosophies of business and clinical philosophies of the organization that's buying you, because you are selling your practice to them and you're going to be an employee of theirs for a number of years. And if you don't believe in their business practices, or you see it, the trend line of the type of practices that they're purchasing going in the wrong direction, or the value of the actual business because of a bad reputation going in the wrong direction, then your 40% that you have mandatorily reinvested in this DSO is going to be worth a lot less than you want it to be worth. So that's another thing that you want to consider. And then another thing, and the last thing that you're probably going to want to consider is the type of people that are going to be managing you on an everyday basis. How heavy of a hand are they going to have in your life? I've seen people basically sell their soul because they wanted an extra turn, which is an extra multiple. So for, say, another $1 million, they went with a company that maybe was a little bit more heavy-handed, a little bit more micromanaging approach, and they hated their life, as compared to somebody that might have had a relationship with another DSO that they sold to with a much lighter touch, where the philosophy was, I bought your practice because it was kicking ass. I'm not going to disrupt that. You do you. I would say for most dentists, you want to try to look for a DSO with a light hand that purchase good assets and aren't buying practices that they're helping to turn around. Those are just some of the quick things.
A lot of people don't realize that there is no consensus on how to calculate EBITDA. The way you calculate EBITDA is different than the way I calculate EBITDA. It's not a generally accepted accounting principle. And so there is always the game of what is your EBITDA, as you said. So that's interesting. If we go back to DSI and how you help people, how you help dentists really become profitable, become students of their practice, students of their numbers, and become business owners, when you see someone who is new to DSI, what are a handful of things, maybe we call them mistakes, that they're making that most dentists make, areas of improvement?
Yeah. First of all, I don't think that anybody needs to beat themselves up over their lack of understanding of what's happening in their dental practice. We were never taught this stuff in dental school. We weren't granted this knowledge when we were born, right? It's not innate knowledge. This is stuff that you have to go out there, and self-education, you have to go find it. And a lot of people just don't do that in their careers. So I think that the biggest mistake that people make is lack of personal self-education. It just baffles me how many people will go $600,000 into debt and then another $1 million into debt to buy a dental practice. So they're $1.6 million into debt. They have all this debt. They buy this asset from somebody else, and they don't do anything to educate themselves on how to run the thing, or even the basics of business and how to read a financial report. It's crazy. So to me, one of the things that we work with is financial education. You mentioned Robert Kiyosaki earlier. He was the godfather of financial education. It's like, hey man, these are the 4 quadrants. Understand them, and understand the difference between a business owner and an employee, and a small business owner and a large business owner, and an asset and a liability. I had Robert on the podcast a couple of years ago. Very interesting fella, but he's done a lot as far as education, financial education. But there are unlimited resources nowadays for practice management and financial education when it comes to dental practice ownership. So that's one of the biggest mistakes that I find that people make is just lack of education, lack of knowledge, lack of understanding where their actual money is going when they collect it at the end of every single month, how a dollar flows through their dental practice. If you don't know that, then you're really handicapping yourself and you're really just flying blind as far as I'm concerned.
It's fascinating because you're right about dental school. It's all clinical. And of course, most dentists would say it's not even enough clinical, but there is zero business or financial classes or teaching at all in that regard. And so it's really interesting how you almost give them a 101 accounting course for dental practices to help them understand that, because when you're at the summit and people start talking in numbers about what's your overhead, and you've got and you guys have different levels, as if you can get your overhead to this level, then you're this rank in the DSI system. What's the record for overhead for you guys?
I think we had the Jeffries, Alex and Mackenzie Jeffrey in Niceville, Florida. Beautiful, very productive dental practice, super high producers, very efficient, sophisticated business owners. They're black belt coaches for DSI. I believe they got to 26% overhead. And if you add their compensation, 30% compensation to that, means that they are 44% profitable.
That's insane.
It's insanity. It's insanity, but that's not typical. But our black belt status from a perspective of overhead is if you can get to 50% fixed and variable expense combined, excluding doctor compensation, you add doctor compensation, so you're 20 to 25% profitable. That's a black belt level practice. That is the target for private equity and DSOs. That's what they're looking for. A sophisticated business owner that can be 20 to 25% profitable.
That's phenomenal. So as we wind down here, how can people learn more about DSI? How can they get connected? Talk about all the places they can find you and hear you.
Yeah, thanks, Ross. I appreciate that. So I think that if you want to talk to me personally, the best way to do that is go to truedentalsuccess.com. That's our main website. And on that website, it'll list all of the speaking engagements I have coming up, all of the live events that we're hosting coming up. It'll tell you more about the podcast, my social media outlets. That's the one main place that people can go to learn a lot more in a very short period of time. But also I'm on Instagram, Dr. Mark Costas on Instagram. Podcast, wherever you find podcasts, it's the Dentalpreneur Podcast. We have a Facebook group, the Dental Success Institute on Facebook. It's a closed community. We'll let you in if you request access. Those are the big places.
And you don't have to be a DSI member, although if you're listening, you should be a DSI member, but you don't have to be a DSI member to go to the summit in the summertime, correct?
Correct. It's April, I believe, 12th and 13th this year in San Antonio, Texas. Again, just go to truedentalsuccess.com. It'll give you all the details to going to the summit, where we'll probably have between 800 and 950 people there this year. I have a very secret, very special keynote presenter this year that I can't let out of the bag. I'll tell you after we cut the mics off. But once we announce him, I think it's going to be very big this year.
Like I said, I went this past summit. It was in the summertime in San Antonio as well. And it was phenomenal. It was a massive event and I thought the content was great. So if you're quasi interested or intrigued with DSI based on this conversation, you should absolutely go to the website, learn more. You should absolutely go to the summit and get connected. I know people in DSI. I've seen them go from owner of a job to owner of a business. And I've actually seen them go from owner of a job to owner of a business to selling to a DSO for a big number. And they have cracked the code on how to teach people how to build a business in dentistry. It's phenomenal.
Oh, thank you so much, Ross. Hey, man, do you mind? You got 5 minutes? Do you mind if I turn the tables on you just a little bit? Because this is going to be a crossover episode, and I'm sure my people are going to want to know just a little bit about you.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so this is your podcast, so your listeners know all about you, but how did you get into dentistry, and what exactly is it that you do for dentists? Because you aren't a dentist. You're just a very large ex-football player that hangs out with dentists pretty much on the regular every day.
Yeah, and I got I've had 2 cavities in my life. I got my first one at 35, and I was bitter about it. And I think I got them both at 35. I was really never. I'm 6'8" as Mark, and I have a very big mouth. I have my wisdom teeth, and they were way in the back, and I just had been eating bad for about 6 months. And then I guess I didn't, because I'm maniacal about my teeth. I was so pissed off that I got cavities. So that'll never happen again. About 7 or 8 years ago, I was a traditional financial advisor, and I ended up having an orthodontist client. And then he introduced me to one of his friends, and one of his friends was a connector type. And next thing I knew, I had 30 dental clients. And so I fell in this world of dentists, and I was like, I didn't even know this ecosystem existed. And so dentists are small business owners. And so there's just a lot of planning opportunities for that. But then as time went on, I really questioned, I was like, what is the highest value you can provide somebody? And I said, I think it's helping someone with taxes, helping them save their money in taxes, because you can do good investment planning, but you won't know for a decade or more. You can do good retirement planning, but you won't know for 2 or 3 decades. You can do good insurance planning. You won't know unless something catastrophic happens. But if you do good tax planning, you'll know by April 15th. So I started going down the wormhole of learning more and more about tax, and got to be pretty good about learning about tax, and really transitioned several years ago, transitioned away from traditional stocks, bonds, insurance, into really helping high income people legally avoid paying taxes, and helping people with large capital gain events legally avoid paying taxes. And so that's what I do. Turns out that the average dentist is a relatively high income person, and there's a decent amount of dentists these days that have large capital gain events. So that's what I do for people.
That's cool. What's the name of your firm, and how do people get in touch with you?
So Coastal Investment Advisors is my firm. They can get in touch with me, Ross at rossbrannan.com, or it's my cell phone, because I pick up my phone all the time. You just text me or call me at 850-566-7999, 850-566-7999. And that's my story. Pretty simple.
All right. And you are an ex-football player, 6'8". You played for Florida State, who's having a decent season this season.
Yeah, I'm having a little swag, a little Florida State swag on. We've had our ups and downs, but we're back. We're undefeated going to the conference championship game as we record this right here, and potentially could be in the college football playoff, but our quarterback is hurt. So I don't know what that looks like if we make it to the playoff. Most people are pessimistic, but something deep down inside tells me we might be able to pull a rabbit out of a hat, but we'll have to see. So I played offensive tackle back in the mid to late 90s, back when Florida State was really good, won a national title, was pretty good, but career ended by an injury. I had 6 knee surgeries while I was playing at FSU, but I had a lot of fun and ended up staying in Tallahassee. And and now I'm married and have 5 kids. So if I'm not doing this type of stuff, I'm Ubering some kid around somewhere.
Hey, tell me this. So you've had a lot of ex-teammates go into the NFL, lots, and even some big ones.
Yeah.
Have you niched NFL players at all as far as financial planning?
No, I haven't, for a couple of reasons. A lot of them are actually terrible clients, because a lot of them go broke. Number 2, a lot of them, their agents have their hands in them and have side deals with people. And honestly, maybe I could do it. I've never really tried really hard, never really been interested in it. Maybe if I fell into it. But you could argue with this new NIL, name, image, and likeness, people don't know that those are all taxable events, and from what I've heard, taxes are not withheld. So we're going to see an ESPN 30 for 30 on these guys have back taxes due before they go to the NFL draft.
That's going to be crazy. You know that if they don't have an advisor, if they get $1 million for an NIL contract, they're going to spend $1 million.
Yeah. When I was playing, people get Pell Grant checks, and that thing was gone like within an hour. And so it's unfortunate. What a lot of these guys don't realize is most of these guys, the vast majority of them, are not going to play professionally. If they do play professionally, it's for a cup of coffee, like for an hour. What they don't realize is they should all graduate with probably $250,000 in the bank or more, because they're making more money now than the average worker in the town their university is in. Tallahassee is a state capital. Austin, Texas is a state capital. Tuscaloosa, Alabama, not a big town. Knoxville, Tennessee, not a big town. Athens, Georgia. These are not, the average person might make $50,000 or $60,000 there. And there's these guys who are doing much better than that. So they will all look back and be like, man, I wish I would have done better with my money.
How did you get into financial planning in the first place?
I fell into real estate right out of college, and I owned a bunch of rental properties and was doing really well in real estate. And I just got sick of it. And then I was a client of a firm, and the firm recruited me to work for them. And I'd always been financially minded, and people always asked me financial advice. And so I was like, let me just do that. And that's just how it happened. And then from there, it's just always an evolution. Then it went from traditional financial advisory to more advanced alternative tax planning. So who knows where it leads next.
Cool, man. Awesome. Isn't it great the way the wind blows us sometimes? I never thought I was going to be in dentistry. You never thought you were going to be in dentistry. And here we are. And it's been a great ride, actually. Dentistry I've been so blessed to have stumbled into this profession. And the people that I've met in this profession are all my best friends. The profession has taken very good care of myself and my family.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. It's a phenomenal industry. I meet people all the time like, I want to be a doctor. I'm like, don't be a doctor, be a dentist.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to be the top 1% of W-2 earners in the United States and pay 38% plus state tax.
I had a call today with a cardiologist who makes 1.5 million W-2. It's it'd be a lot easier if you were you had a W-2 of like 100 and then 1.4 of K1s, but that's not how it works.
What state?
They're in Florida, so 37% in Florida, but still, it still stings.
Yeah, 40. The quick math is $600,000 off the top, right there. Bam. See ya. Thank you, Uncle Sam. Here you go.
So,
yeah, cool, man. Awesome. So, thanks for letting me sneak in some questions there.
Absolutely. Hey, I appreciate your time. I think anyone who's not a part of DSI should be a part of DSI. So, go on the website, TrueDentalSuccess.com, right?
Correct.
TrueDentalSuccess.com. So, thank you so much for coming on, Mark. I really appreciate your time.
All right, Ross. Take care, buddy. Good to see you again.
You've been listening to the Financial Flossing Podcast with Ross Brannon.
This has been another episode of Financial Flossing with Ross Brannon, guiding dental professionals to a brighter future. If you liked what you heard, consider subscribing wherever you listen to podcasts. For more on Ross Brannon, visit rossbrannon.com.
Ross Brannon is a registered representative, Coastal Equities, Inc., and investment advisory representative, Coastal Investment Advisors, Inc. Investment advisory services are offered through Coastal Investment Advisors, Inc., and securities are offered through Coastal Equities, Inc. Member FINRA, SIPC, 1201 North Orange Street, Suite 729, Wilmington, Delaware, 19801.